What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're back with the third-person / action RPG tutorial. We're going to be finishing up inventory, or at least the functional parts of the inventory. We will still be making it look nicer and neater, but this is going to be the majority of the things that we need. So, in the last episode we were able to press E on items that we were close enough to, listed at the bottom there, to add them to our inventory, and we were able to open and close our inventory. Well, now we're going to be able to use the items we added to actually select the elements from the inventory and then add them to our character. So in this case it's weapons, so we're going to be adding them to our character's hand and changing their stats to the proper stats for using that weapon and such. So let's press our button to open our inventory. We're actually using Unreal's default navigation system for now. We will most likely rewrite our own in the next episode, but for now this works. You can also click on them with the mouse and it will work. But when I hit enter, I will equip the weapon, and then I can close the menu, and I've got the sword now. I can go attack with the sword. You know it's the sword stats because I made the sword intentionally slow. And then I can go and I can select the dagger, and the dagger is really fast. And then I can go and I can select the axe, which is horrendously slow. But at least I'm using the correct weapon. And just like that, I can use the same weapon to go and unequip it. So if I select the dagger, and then deselect the dagger, or select the sword, and then dagger, off, anything like that. That way I can always go back to my bare hands and use my basic punching attack. So let's get into it today. We're not going to add anything to the code. In fact, there's not a ton of changes we even have to make. We just have to add changes to all the right places. We basically need to know what we're trying to grab and where we need to get data from. So in the first episode, we had this open-close menu input action, which was opening our inventory, creating the inventory window widget, and grabbing a reference to that and displaying it to the screen. So if you have not watched the first episode, I'll leave a link in the icon in the top right corner so you can check it out right now. It'll be very useful for this episode, so I'd highly recommend you do it. Then let's get into what we're going to need to do today. So, in our base weapon BP, what we were doing before, when we ran into a weapon, we were just attaching it to our character's hand. We were setting the collision properly, removing the old weapon, setting the new weapon, and changing our attack speed and other stats. Well, that's good, but we need a way to remove our weapon as well, because in attach weapon, we automatically remove it. You can see this is actually copy and paste. But we never actually changed the weapon to be able to be just your bare hands again. Essentially, you'd always have to have a weapon. So let's write a quick function in the base weapon BP, just called remove weapon, where we essentially get rid of the weapon that we're on and set the attack speed back to normal. That way we can use our fists again if we unequip or lose a weapon. As I've said, it's copied and pasted from below, but essentially what we're doing is we've added custom event. I've called it remove weapon. I've added a base character, that's my Gears of War template character, and I've called it character reference. Then I drag off of character reference and get the current weapon, so we know what weapon we're currently using, currently have in our hand. I make sure it's valid. To do it in this sense, where you have this whole, you have the code flow with the variable, you right click on the variable. So if I say get current weapon again, but actually select it, I can right click on this node and hit convert to validated get. So this will make it perfectly safe to use. Only if it's valid do we want to cast it to base weapon BP, because base weapon BP current weapon is our default weapon object, which is our code class. Base weapon BP is our blueprint, which we need because that's where our meshes and our collision boxes are. Then from that, I grab the weapon mesh, and I make sure there's no collision on it anymore, because we don't want to have any collision on an object that is no longer there. Since the weapon mesh is going to be gone now, we don't want to continue to damage things or enemies when we hit with it. Then we want to detach the weapon from component. So quite literally, off of weapon mesh, call detach from component. Everything can be kept relative, call modify can be true. And then we're going to set our player's attack speed, this comes from our character reference, back to the default, which is 1.0. Now we have the ability to remove a weapon without adding a new one, which is a useful ability. So let's go ahead and make this work with the inventory. So in the last episode, we did have the inventory window working. We were getting the character, grabbing their inventory component that we made in code, grabbing the item list from it, and then setting the values appropriately. So as we press E to equip items, they're being added to our inventory, and then whenever we create the inventory widget, it grabs all the data from our inventory and displays it to the user. Everything we have here is good. We're not going to change anything. I'm going to add actually a new function, set object reference. The same way we were doing set weight text and set name text, I'm going to add a set object reference. To be completely honest, you could use this for everything as opposed to having these two other functions, but I'm going to keep them in case you ever want to independently change the weight or the name without changing the object reference, which is very possible. So in our single inventory item, and just to remind you guys, the inventory window is the main window that pops up. It's got this transparent background with this vertical box that the single inventory item widgets get added to. And they're just a button with a name and a weight. So in here I had set name text and set weight text that we filled out last episode. Just go ahead and make a new function right here. Call it set object reference. And literally we're going to pass along the object to this inventory item. So we know exactly what item to spawn, or at least what class to spawn from this item. Make sure you compile and save once you name this function. I've made the input parameter a default item, which is our default item is essentially anything we can pick up or equip. Default weapon and base weapon BP are children of this. So this is a higher level in case we're equipping armor or some sort of quest item. But make sure you add this so we know what to pass along. And then we're just going to make a variable. You can actually, if you don't want to go find it, just drag off of object and hit promote to variable and then call it object reference. And that will make sure it's the right type. Otherwise, the type you're looking for is default item. So there you go. Now, when we're in our inventory window, remember this is where we're looping through all of our inventory items. We set our weight, we set our name. I also bring off of the for loop. I drag off the for loop, grab the array element, and just flat out set the object reference using that element. So to be honest, bringing over the entire object is probably a little much. You most likely don't need to know everything that the weapon has in your inventory, but maybe you do. And just for the sake of simplicity right now, I'm doing that. But feel free to change it to your liking and what fits your game. And then just go ahead and call set object reference on your single inventory item widget that we made. And then we're going to do all this logic to go ahead and focus the inventory items so that you can use your keyboard on it without having to use your mouse and click. So essentially the way we do this is we're adding our child, as you know here, once we've created our single inventory item widget. Then we get all children of our vertical box. Our vertical box is this one, where all the single inventory item widgets go to. We're going to get all children of it. We're going to get index 0 in this case, because we can always start our user's focus at the top of the list. Then we're going to cast this item, because it's just a widget object reference at this point, to the item that we want. We know it's a single inventory item widget that we're adding, so we want to cast to that. Then this has an item button, which is of course the big button that we click to make things happen, to spawn the weapon and all. Go ahead and grab that, and we're essentially going to focus that. So get owning player. This will get the owner of the widget and their player controller. So once we have this, that's the player controller. For set input mode, game and UI, you can drag off of get owning player to do that. Here you go. And then in widget to focus, we just use our item button. We want to focus the first item button, our first single inventory item in our vertical box. And now that will be focused. So the last thing we have to do is actually perform the logic to spawn or despawn the weapon when we select it in the inventory. Essentially equip or unequip it. So let's go to our single inventory item. And I'm going to do this on pressed. So the way you do that is you click on your little button here in the designer. Scroll all the way down to the bottom in the details panel and hit on pressed. On press will work if it's a confirmation key like enter, as well as if you click on it. So usually that's the one I pick, but you can pick whatever you want. It'll go to your event graph. So here's on pressed. You can see it's the only thing I have in there. And what we're going to do is make a boolean called is in use. So just go ahead and add a variable. Click on the little pill and select boolean. Is in use is essentially just a way to determine if we already have this item equipped or not. I didn't necessarily want to call it is equipped because, again, if you have like a quest item or something that's not really put on your character, but just something that you have selected at the current time, I didn't know if that would be confusing. So is in use just basically means that this character is using this item from our inventory at the current time. They have this single inventory item selected in their inventory. So you could have one from weapon, one from armor, one from quest items, whatever you want. Basically, if it is in use, we're going to remove it. So that way, because if they're pressing it again, it's saying, okay, I have my sword equipped and I press sword again, I want to remove it. I don't want it to be in use anymore. We're going to get the owning player pawn. This gets the character of the widget. So the owning character of the widget. And then we're going to cast that to our base character, which of course mine is called Gears of War template character. No, it does not quite fit, but you get the gist. And then we want to grab the weapon from that. Same method as before. We just drag off get current weapon. And then convert it to a validated get. And then you cast it to the base weapon BP, just like before as well. And then we're going to call remove weapon off of it. That's the function we wrote earlier. That function does require a character reference, so you can just go ahead and bring in your Gears of War template character. I'm going to delete these, but you can see it's all being done here. Lastly, I just set is in use to be false. We're no longer using that item. We just disabled it. We just unequipped it, took it off, whatever. And the other way around is if it's false, if is in use is false, so we're clicking on it and it's not currently equipped or in use. What we're going to need to do is actually spawn the actor, and then we're going to do all this logic to essentially determine what items are in use and then attach it to the player. So our object reference is what we set earlier. Remember, we made this function to set our object reference. And what we can actually do is get the class and the transform of this object and then spawn an actor. So the reason I'm doing it this way, you could just go ahead and spawn or make visible the exact object, but if we're destroying this every time we detach it, so say we detach from component, let's go to our base weapon BP. See this right here? Well, now that this is detached from component, we can actually go ahead and just destroy this object. Quite frankly, it doesn't exist anymore to us. So we can destroy actor. I was intentionally holding off on this to show you guys. So we can go ahead and destroy the current weapon once we put it away now, because we're going to be spawning a new class. This will help us free up memory so we don't have a bunch of actors that we're not using still in play. So in your remove weapon, go ahead and destroy the actor. You should do this in attach weapon after the weapon gets dropped as well. So the way you can do this is also when we attach and get rid of the other weapon we have. We can go ahead and do the same thing. Drag off of current weapon and call destroy actor. And go ahead and place it here. I'm going to move everything here over. Make a spot. And then we're going to go ahead and destroy the actor. And this one is from the is not valid. If current weapon is not valid, we won't be able to destroy it. So we can still skip destroy actor, as you see here. And there we go. Now I'm going to make this a little bit cleaner. Just like that. And now whenever we pick up different weapons and equip different weapons, we should be able to go into our game, and all of our memory should be good, because I can go ahead and select this, select all these. As I'm attaching new weapons or removing the same weapon, the old weapon is getting destroyed every time. So if the old weapon is getting destroyed, it's better than how we were doing it before, where we were just making it invisible and detaching it. It was technically staying there in memory, which is not what we want. So just a little cleanup thing I wanted to show you guys. So now we can go ahead and return to what we were doing. Basically, if the item is not already in use and we're selecting it now, here's the logic we have to perform. We're going to grab our object reference that we set in this pass function. We're going to drag off of it and call get class, which is going to return what type of object it is, essentially. So get class, in this case, like if it's a base weapon BP, it'll return that. If it's an axe, sword, dagger, it will return those. And we're also going to drag off and get actor transform. This one isn't too important because it's going to be changed right away, but we do need to give the actor a transform in the spawn actor function. So then just call spawn actor from class. That's what this is. And then the class you pass in is the get class return here. Put that in there. And then put the get actor transform in there as well. We don't need an owner necessarily for this. You can go ahead and add one that might be useful later, but I'm just going to leave everything the way it is now. Then we want to cast this to a base weapon BP. If it succeeds, we'll continue. If it doesn't, this is where you could do, okay, cast to base armor BP, base key BP, base quest item. You know what I mean? You could change this here to whatever item succeeds so we know what we're dealing with, so we don't continue to use the wrong, you know, you don't want to use the weapon logic on the armor and vice versa. I mean, it might work, but you probably want to separate it so they can be different. But say the cast succeeds on base weapon BP, then our job is quite easy from here on out. All we have to do is go and attach our weapon. So the same way that we remove our weapon and all of that, we're going to get our owning player pawn. So the character that owns this widget, cast it to our base character. If the cast succeeds, we use that to call attach weapon. Whoops, sorry, I was bringing the wrong node. Drag off of base weapon BP that we cast to earlier and call attach weapon right here, and then just drag your character reference into the character reference node. Now our weapon will be attached. There's one last thing we have to do, and this logic right here is essentially resetting all the variables that are in use. And the reason for that is, sure, we're setting is in use to be false when we unequip it, but say we just switch between the weapons, we need to make sure that the last one was set to false as well. So if I have the sword and I select the dagger, we're not saying, oh, set the sword to be is in use false. So the next time you go to use it, it will be incorrect. It'll either show nothing there, or you'll have to click it twice to make it go away, or make it pop up, depending on what operation you're doing. So what we actually want to do is go through all of our widgets of single inventory item, so all instances of this widget, and set their variables to be is in use, and then set the new one. Now, if you have multiple things, like again, weapon versus armor, then you don't want to reset your armor just because you changed your sword. But that's okay. We're going to fix that in the next episode, because I have a pretty good method of doing that, and it won't really make sense until we have a neater, organized look for our inventory. So don't worry about that. For now, just go ahead and set them all to false. So how we do this, get all widgets of class. Disabled top level only, actually, because top level only means it will get children of the viewport and not children of certain things like the vertical box in our inventory window. So these single inventory items are children of this vertical box. If we were to keep top level only checked, none of them would be found. But unchecking that will search for all of them in all containers, and that's what we want for here. So make sure you uncheck that. You can see I've done that here. The widget class, make sure you choose single inventory item. And then drag off of this and do a for each loop. Then lastly, here we have our individual elements, so our individual widgets. drag off your array element and set is in use. And for now, again, set them all to false on loop body. Then don't connect this. On completed, go ahead and set is in use to true. So we're looping through, making sure all of the inventory items are set to is in use false, but the one we're currently equipping is in use true. Okay, and there you go, guys. So that logic right there, if you do all that, that will allow you to run around, pick up your weapons, and switch between them in your inventory. Like a much more professional game at this point. We can actually select these items and unequip them from the inventory, as opposed to having to go around the world. We can then close our inventory and go about our day. So anyway, guys, if this did help you and enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. Lets me know that I'm doing a great job making these videos you want to see. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership supporters and my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for continuing to give me support and believing in me. I really appreciate it. If you're interested in joining and giving me some support, then I will leave the details in the description. You can click on it or hit the join button right next to my name, and you'll be able to check out the benefits. If you did have any issues with this episode or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord. We'll be happy to get you fixed up with any issues you had, or kind of teach you about how some of the things work if I left anything a little too bare. Lastly, guys, if you want to come support us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27. We've recently been playing Demon Souls, and I've been playing a game called Man of Medan with my friend David, which has been a lot of fun. So go check it out if you're interested. And again, thank you guys so much for the support. Anyway, guys, I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.